All right, Michael, how's it going?
Doing amazing. How's your weekend going?
It's going good. Yeah, definitely good. I started the Netflix show called Beef last night. Have you heard of that?
Somebody just actually recommended that last night. And when they did, I figured it was some sort of a documentary about the beef industry,
Right.
but I realized it is not.
Yeah, it's not. It's
Sounded cool
a
though.
kind of a comedy sitcom thing. Not really a sitcom. Anyways, it's pretty good so far. But okay, so today though you have some questions for me. What do you got?
Sure, yeah. Let's see. I wrote a couple of things down. I guess okay. The first thing I was curious about was your view on um. Your philosophy around veganism has to do with suffering. So I got just a couple of questions around that. First of which, do you factor in pleasure to that calculation, or is it just sort of the negative?
Um, Only in the sense that I would find that anything that is not suffering is pleasure. Therefore, the least suffering we cause, the more pleasure we cause, for the amount of life.
Okay. So what about pleasure versus just like a neutral non-pleasure state? Do you value the
Um,
pleasure state over the neutral state?
um, I would. I don't know if there's any way for us to cause pleasure, but I don't value pleasure in the way that I've heard other people. So, for example, if you, I think we might have talked about this in our last talk, or maybe that was a different talk I had. But if you had a cow that lived 3 years of suffering and it was going to be killed for beef, and somebody could say, "Hey, would you be willing to let that cow live one more year?" Execute it at 4 years, but that one more year, it's not going to suffer at all. It's just going to get pleasure to kind of outweigh some of the suffering it had. I don't see any benefit in that. If it's fine to kill it, if it's fine to kill it, especially based on the idea of it not having a will to live, if we just say hypothetically we know this cow doesn't care when it dies, I wouldn't want to like prolong its life for added pleasure.
Okay. So yeah, I guess for any viewers on this, I differ from you on the position of the will to live thing, but we did hash that out in our other discussion. So I guess if you want to
Mhm.
hear our differing views on that, just go check out the other talk that we did. Maybe link that in the description, Carson, or
For
something.
sure.
Um, but let's just go with your view for the sake of discussion here. So
Mhm.
um, so there's two worlds, one in which a cow lives for 3 years, you said, and has a life full of pleasure, and then another one where a cow lives for 4 years and has a life full of pleasure, so presumably like one extra year of pleasure. You would not prefer world two. You'd say they're equally good. You have equal preference towards those two worlds.
Well, now that I've thought about it for about 30 more seconds, um, if I were right about that idea of if they don't care about their lives, then yes, 100%. Since I don't know if I will ever be able to know if I'm right, then I would say in the world we have, if there was a perfect hypothetical where they were going to kill the cow at 3 years, and then if they could be convinced to let that cow go into nature, imagining a cow can survive in nature, let's say in a forest where deer's at, a cow could just hang out there. If I could convince them to let that cow just hang out for one more year and experience life, and then they were going to kill it, I would probably go for that. I don't know if it would experience more suffering or pleasure in that sense, but I don't think there's any world where I would want to keep it alive if it's going to still be owned and in on a property to where you can see the edges of the property. And by see the edges, I just mean it's not a big property. Like it's not an endless forest.
Okay, I don't know if I quite follow that. So does the fact that they're living on a contained property change your view as to whether you would value the extra year of pleasureful life?
Um, yeah, I mean, uh,
Okay.
I think so. I I mean, I guess that would be. I wouldn't trust any pleasure or lack of suffering that we would describe within something being owned by us, if that makes sense.
Can we take a pet? Just like maybe let's just walk through a hypothetical. So,
Yeah.
so I have a dog. Is
Mhm.
it better if my dog lives a great life for 1 year or lives a great life for 10 years?
Um, Again, if I'm wrong about that thing that we probably can't know, then I would say it's probably best to go for 10 years.
So,
But
and when
yeah.
you're saying the probably, is that's sort of because you're unsure of whether or not the animal has a will, like a will to live, or a conception of the future, or is that
Well,
not?
it's a mixture of two things. I don't think humans should own animals, like in the grand scheme of things. If I could
Yeah.
have my way, I would need to be convinced otherwise. I don't think they should own animals. So in the sense that it is your dog that you are owning, and it doesn't have the right to go out and just be in nature and live its life, then it is complicated, because I would say what's better than what we currently have with how we treat the owning of animals. Um, I think it would be better to press a button and have every pet die right now
Mhm.
than to continue what we are doing.
Than to continue what we were doing. So, okay, I might agree with that, but I don't know that I would agree that it's better to press a button and have like my pet die, who has a like I would view a very highly net positive life,
Mm-hmm.
on, and it seems to me that if you grant me that my dog like enjoys her life and has, a lot of fun on the walks and enjoys her food and all that,
Mm-hmm.
has a cool routine when she wakes my wife up every morning and wags her tail. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it seems to me that it's good. It's like I value that she has the ability to like experience those good things. And if she had 10 years worth of those experiences, that just seems like if I could choose between those two worlds, that the 10 year of great experiences for my dog and the 1 year, it like I would choose the 10, like all else being equal.
Mm-hmm.
Would you? And just if we took the hypothetical and just contained it to the one
To the
rescue
one
dog
dog.
with a good life. Yeah.
Right. And that's why I kind of hesitated at first, because I don't know how different I would feel if everybody treated their pets the way you likely do. And so with yours, I don't know. I'm kind of on the fence, because I don't think I have talked about it enough with others. The idea of likely them having a better life than in the wild, but it's a better controlled life versus
Mhm.
a worse free life. And I don't know what they prefer. It's probably kind of like that. My idea of them not having a will to live, where we won't be able to know that. I don't think we'll be able to know if they would have preferred the freedom with the more suffering.
Mhm.
So yeah, I don't think I can
Okay.
answer that. I don't think I
I
know.
think I understand that. So you don't want to answer because you think there's a chance that my dog, for example, even though her life is net positive, there might be something that supersedes that, which is she has, like, if she was given the choice, she wouldn't choose that net positive life contained to my home. She would choose, maybe, you're not sure, she might choose to live out in the
Hmm.
wild, and maybe it's a net negative life, but she would still choose it. And so I'm taking that
Hmm.
choice away from her. Is that kind of your view?
Yeah, that's definitely a pretty big factor.
Okay.
Do you want me to
Um,
give you an
sure.
analogy to
Yeah.
explain why I look at it like that? So I like to compare it to slavery. Not compared as in slavery, it's as bad as slavery. But imagine you were in the South in the time of slavery, and they brought a bunch of slaves onto the stage to sell them to whoever's out in the crowd. And you're against slavery, but you see that a person stand up here. This is an individual. You can see and recognize this as a human, and they're saying asking how much people want to pay for this person. Now you could either not buy a slave because you don't want a slave and just go along with your life, or you can say, hey, I have endless amounts of money, I'm a millionaire, I can purchase a slave and tell them as quick as possible, hey, I don't believe in slavery, but if you go there, you're probably going to get whipped and have all this stuff going on. I'm going to take you to my house. You'll be owned because there's no realistic way to free you because you can't be freed here, and travel's insane. So I can't get you to the northern states. So you can just live here, live out a great life, eat all the food you want. I'm just going to treat you like a best friend. But you're technically owned and you're here in this house and you can't really leave the house because there's nowhere to go in a realistic in this slave state. Which would you do? Would you purchase a slave and do that, or would you walk them by?
Yeah, I mean, I would ask the slave what they want, and I think I would respect their decision, assuming they had a rational mind. So obviously, you can't do that with an animal. So let's assume that it was a mentally disabled slave who couldn't like think through the question or answer it.
Let's even say that they want to, because I have a good reason for why you should not.
Oh, interesting. Okay, because I would snap take that. Yeah.
Okay.
Why
I think
am I wrong there?
Here's why you're wrong. Okay, so and it's the same with the pet industry. It's slightly different with rescuing, but let's just take the pet industry. But the reason you're wrong here is because when you buy this slave, even to give it a great life, you just put it in demand. You're making the slave sellers at the end of the day go, okay, this is how many we sold, so this is how many we're going to bring in from Africa. So you saved one, but to take one that wouldn't have been there to make a new slave, it's put in demand. So imagine 50 people did what you did. And then and so it's the same where I could go to a pet store and I can go, oh, this poor puppy is in this tiny cage and it's living this horrible life. But if I buy it to give it a good life, it's putting it in demand. They go, oh, sweet, we bred these dogs into existence, and now this guy gave us all this money for it. Let's breed more. Yeah. And so I think if you're against slavery, if you're against animal slavery, if you're against all these different things, you have to do what feels worse and abstain from normalizing it.
Yes. Okay. So that's an interesting sort of empirical claim, of which I'm not yet convinced. You make a good argument that maybe that is increasing the demand for slavery, or in the case of a dog, maybe. But let's just keep it to slavery, and we can do the comparison after. But are you sure though? Like the other side of this could be if everyone starts, like, let's say that 20% of the people that are buying slaves are now like essentially freeing the slaves or whatever, like the mentally disabled slaves, they're giving them a good life and everything. And it starts to become known that people are doing this, and the word starts to spread, like, and then people are like, well, why are they doing that? Why do they care? Oh, because they value slaves' lives and they're important. Like, maybe there's, like, when you do an analysis of the entire cost benefit and utility calculation or whatever, it comes out like negative for the demand increase, but then positive for the, maybe the social change increase or something. So I think if you're saying that that the empirics come out in favor of not buying the slave due to the, like, utility calculation, it's possible, like, and I can grant that for the hypothetical if you just want to assume that. But I think they're like, I'm probably agnostic, but leaning towards agreeing, but agnostic on whether or not that would be the case.
Yeah, so it's possible. I think it's unlikely, and I think it's easier to see it within the pet version. If you get a pet because you want to give it a good life versus some other bad life it might have, or the bad life at the store, then if people ask you, like, why you bought this pet, you could say, I'm not against this breeding him in and making it in demand, but I wanted to give it this good life. And then that person could be inspired to go, oh, okay, I want to start thinking about how much I care about animals. But that one or two people, or however many, ask you about that, and you have those one-on-one conversations, has got to be a lot less than the tons of people that would see you and this puppy and go, oh, that puppy's so cute and they're having so much fun. Right. I want that in my life. And then they go buy it. So it depends on how often you're at
Okay.
the slave park playing with your slave or not, maybe.
I have another hypothetical to tell you why you're wrong on this. Okay. So first let me ask you a question. So
Yeah.
is the reason that you're bringing up the increasing demand for the slave industry because you think that the net utility will be lower in that world where I buy the slave?
Um, the increasing demand. Sorry, I got something in my throat. The increasing demand is just based on the purchasing itself.
Mhm.
You're asking if it's
Why do you
based
care
on the
about that?
utility?
Why does it matter that demand goes up? Is it because that it like, oh, it goes up and it'll mean that more slaves will be,
Yeah, more
created,
people
and
will
the
either be
net
turned.
utility will be lower in that world? Is
Oh,
that the reason?
um, I would say that I might factor in utility when a law is not in the favor of what you want. So yes, but I also might be willing to just call it each individual's like
Just
adding a new. I'm trying to think.
like, why do you care about demand going up?
Why do I care about demand going up? Well, okay, so in this case, it would be based on the idea that another human is brought into this situation, which is a bad situation, while not completely taking away by not countering it. Like you're taking this slave is just making sure that person will have a better life than they would have had, but
Right.
not having a great life. So I would say a slave having a great life plus a slave having a bad life is worse than a slave having a bad life. Because you have a good and a half over here, or a half good, half bad, full bad. That's 1.5 bad if you add them together.
Sorry, I'm not following this. Are you saying that in the world where I buy a slave, in a world where I buy a slave, there will be one more slave that is, I've created the demand for one more slave, and then
Mhm,
therefore the total, like, I keep wanting to say utility calculation. Is it like,
mhm.
let me know if I'm not thinking, I want this to be in, um, given your view on this. So
Yeah, yeah.
um is that the thing? So it's like I buy the slave, it creates demand for one more slave, and now there's two slaves that have like this life, and we're looking at that world where there's two slaves with this life, or the other world where it's one slave with this other life. Is that like the two kind of things you're comparing?
Yeah, I think so. I don't usually base anything off utility.
Okay.
It was especially with humans. But yes, for the sake of right now, I would say yes, because
Okay.
that's kind of the problem is breeding something into existence for a moral wrong is bad. And so if you breed a slave into existence, this is not good. And if you have somebody that already exists that can have an all right life but still not a good life, that if making that person have a good life puts in demand and forces this bad action to happen, then yeah, I would have to say, well, and I'm just gonna go with that for that right for right now. But I
Okay.
think the legality complicates things for sure.
Yeah, let's not worry about that just yet. So,
Yeah.
and the reason I'm going to utility, by the way, is because
Mhm.
you said that suffering is kind of the basis for how you view animal, like veganism and animals and rights and that sort of thing.
Mhm.
Sorry, it's less about rights and more about suffering. So that's why I'm basing this on the utility calculation. So anyway, I'll
Mhm.
give you my hypothetical of why I think it creates a weird reductio, and maybe this gives you an outlet to better clarify your position.
Yeah.
So let's do a similar kind of thing where you're doing uh the you walk by and you see a drowning child or something in a pond.
Mhm.
And so if that was a self-contained situation, like it costs you nothing, a very limited effort to like reach out and save her, is it morally good to save the child?
Yeah, I'd say so.
Okay. Um, so then what if we bring in new information and there's somebody standing next to the pond that says like, oh, wait, before you save this child, like I have all the scientific studies to prove it and everything, but and I can instantly transfer this knowledge into your head so you're convinced of this. But if you do this, if you save this child, there will be a worse world that comes out of it. Like there will be more kids that in the future fall into this lake, because if this one child drowns, they're gonna put up fences, they're gonna close off the lake or whatever. It's gonna be a better world, and you are convinced that that is the case. So in the similar thing, it's like if you're just evaluating the two worlds, yeah, you'd pick the world where just the one child dies versus the 100 more that will fall in the lake and die after.
Mm-hmm.
But it still seems like it's the right decision to still save the child. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, you're right. No, I think it's completely the right decision to save the child, and I do see the parallel with the slave. Yeah, well, I think a couple different elements complicate it. So for one, with the slave, you are you are you're purchasing a slave. You're not just purchasing a slave and just putting it in demand, but you are owning that slave. You are having that slave. Hold on, let me think about this a little further. Because that element doesn't matter. I mean, it does in a sense. I think it negatively affects things, but what we're talking about is the demand itself. Um, Even in the sense that if you can free it. Okay, so here's what I'd say. If
Well,
there was
let's
if
just
it,
start. Can you start? Or if you want to go somewhere to answer this, that's fine. But
huh?
which you said it would still be right to save the child.
I would save the child in that scenario you said,
Yeah.
but I don't know if I would save the child in this scenario where across the stream is a sadistic person that likes to watch one child drown a day, and legally they're allowed to. They have an endless amount of children and they can do this. If they push a child in and they're legally allowed to do this, I can't do anything about this other than if I save the child and put it on my side, then it can be free on my side.
Okay.
If I save that child, let's say I can only do it once, and if I know that if I save that one, they're going to throw in another one that day because I need to make sure one goes every day, I wouldn't save the child.
You
And that
wouldn't.
I wouldn't. I mean, why not? Why would you? That's like pressing the button and making a child pop out in thin air just for the sake of something that can have pleasure will have pleasure. If they're going to continue that cycle, and me doing that is going to make them breed even more kids to put in that pond, I at this point I do not think I would. What would
Uh,
you?
I
I mean,
think
just
so.
if you picture that
Like
playing out, they're
it's a
legally
weird.
allowed to.
It's a difficult hypothetical. Is you'd have to add in that there's like infinite children or some like it seems like I am still saving one child from this sadistic person's like
Mhm.
quiver of children
But they're
that
going to
are
make more
available for
children,
this.
and that's why I'm comparing it to the slave. They're going to make more slaves. If there's a cap on slaves, and then each one I save is just a freed slave, and there's no my action isn't causing something else. I think you have to look at if your action
Yeah,
is
this is
causing.
like, yeah, I think this is for me where I would go through my threshold deontological calculation and say, like, it's a rights concern, or it's a rule based, like I would save a child is better than not save a child, like utility aside, up to a certain like threshold of disutility by that decision. So if if the sadistic person was saying, yeah, if you don't let this child drown, I will, and I believe he has the ability to do this, torture like millions of universes of children. It's like, yeah, oh boy, but I would let the child drown. But I would have to be convinced that there's a high enough disutility threshold for overriding that action of saving the child. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it does. It does.
And so if it's just breeding one more into existence, I don't think that would cross my utility threshold. So I would still take the like the rule based action of like save a child where possible kind of thing.
mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I guess I might need to think about it further. To me, it makes perfect sense, and I can't see getting around it. But it also seems like it might be against my theories with like trolley car and whatnot. So
What do you have anything like how would you argue against my like so how would you where am I going wrong thinking about that?
sorry, I just the fact that it went against what I was saying, that's where you went wrong. Can you describe it one more time?
Sure. So my foundational like moral principles are threshold deontology, which is you do like I can't remember the right term for this in the system, but it's basically like you have rules like don't it's bad to kill, it's good to save people, blah blah blah.
Mm-hmm.
And you do those things up to a certain like disutility threshold. So
Mm-hmm.
um in the trolley car scenario, it's like, yeah, you would it's bad to like push the fat man in front of the train. So it's like, don't do that. But if it's to save, 10,000 people, that would probably cross the utility threshold. And so the morally correct action would be to push him in front of the train.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's to save one person, then I would go with the rule of don't push or even to save like 5 people, probably like I probably wouldn't do it. So that being the underlying moral system by which I'm evaluating the action. Remind me again. Sorry, the scenario. The sadistic guy. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if I would have to, in order for me to not save the child, I'm going to go against the rule of it's good to save children.
Mm-hmm.
I would need to believe that there was like disutility created through that action that
Mm.
exceeded my threshold, such that I would prefer I would have a preference to the world where I let the child drown, go against my rule to and maybe that's like he's holding a knife to 10,000 kids' throats and he's like, if you don't let this child survive, these ones are all going to get it, and if you do let the child drown, I'll let them free or whatever. So it's like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, okay, I guess I'll let the child drown begrudgingly in that case and be consistent with my moral system.
Yeah, what do you see a difference whatsoever in letting something take its course versus being the cause of it? Letting a child drown versus pushing the fat man over?
Good question.
Because I don't know if I would. Well, I'll let you finish pondering it.
Can you flesh it out? Is this like pulling like, is it better to pull the lever of the trolley car versus push a
Yeah,
fat man, or what? Like, give me
yeah.
two
Well,
things to think about and I'll try to
yeah.
answer.
So if you pull the lever and it goes, you are doing the action that kills
Right.
this individual. But if somebody is in the water and you can save them, but
Mm-hmm.
you do not, because you know the outcomes that are going to come. Um, do you view that as different? Do you think that you did just as bad of a thing in both cases? Or let's say there's 5 kids,
Mm-hmm.
or not 5 kids, but let's say you're a doctor, and like that scenario, where the person comes in, you can do the taking out all their organs to save 5 people, but you are actively killing
Mm-hmm.
this person to save more. um well, I guess, yeah. So, anyways, like
Yeah,
the action of doing it, does that affect you in any way, or do you
I
feel like
think
the
so.
lack of action of saving is
I
like
think it
killing?
does. I think it does. I think it does change it, but I'm not 100% sure. Like I could
Mm-hmm.
probably be talked out of that if I'm not sure.
Gotcha. So
It
I
seems intuitively like that the hospital harvest organs thing. It's like if I'm gonna kill, like there's some guy in the waiting room and he has the 5 organs to save these 5 people. That seems like a much worse thing to do than like not pulling a lever on the trolley
Mm-hmm.
car to, you know, to direct the track accordingly to have the better, the less people killed outcome. It's yeah, I think I do see a difference in those things. Do you
Mm-hmm.
disagree?
No, I see a huge difference, and that's why I would let the child drown, but I would not kill the individuals.
I see.
Now, would you let the child drown if 5 were going to be put in?
Yeah, I don't know exactly where my line would be. I probably would, 5 would not cross the threshold though. It would probably be in the hundreds. I would think somewhere between 100 and 1,000 would be somewhere in my line in there.
Okay, but it would be a different line for something where you're causing it.
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
I feel like it'd have to,
And like
because I don't.
how brutal the action is, and like, yeah, I think those things would all
Yeah.
factor in.
Yeah, so I think that's the main difference for me. That's what, at least at this point, that I can't get past is I wouldn't pull the lever to save the 5, and saving the girl would be pulling the lever.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, yeah,
Interesting.
it's just worded very differently, but yeah,
it is. It is. Interesting.
Especially because
does the brutality of the action factor in for you?
Emotionally, it probably would in the moment, but I don't think morally it should.
Okay.
The level of suffering maybe should, but no, because if you know that level of suffering will happen to another and another and another, the level of suffering shouldn't matter. It's just that if I can witness a 5-year-old going through suffering, it's way worse than if I knew that exact same amount of suffering was happening to a 5-year-old I couldn't witness.
So okay, so let me just like ask that a different way. So we have the trolley car, and there's two of the scenarios. So in the first scenario we've got going on, we got like two trolley cars coming, and you got 2 decisions to make. In the first one, you have the option to pull the lever, direct the track from 1 to 5.
Mm-hmm.
The other one, you have the option of, wait, you said you wouldn't pull the lever though.
I would not pull the lever to save the 5 by killing 1. No.
Okay. Is there any threshold there? Like, what if it was to save like half of the people on the planet?
Last time we talked, you made me realize that there probably would be some detail of suffering that could be made to happen to make me do a certain thing differently. But no, for the most part, I would say I would not kill I would not do this harmful thing to prevent something that was naturally going to happen. And by naturally, I mean even if others are going to cause it.
So would your threshold be different in terms of how many would die, in the case where you're pulling a lever versus the case where you're like the action to save the people on the other side, instead of pulling a lever, it's like torturing somebody and like brutally harvesting their organs, like the doctor or something? I don't know.
Yeah, so no, that's kind of why my stance is what it is that I wouldn't do the action.
Okay. Well, but up to a certain threshold though, like
we could work towards that and see. I don't know. I don't think so if I had to kill somebody to save 10 million or whatever, no, I don't think I would. I mean, that's kind of how I view that's how I view rights. That's how I view at least rights I would want for myself. I care more about myself than I care about 10 million people. And so if somebody could kill me to save 10 million people, I hope they don't. It depends on if people I care about are in that 10 million, and then maybe
I would go the other way there. I hope they would kill me to save 10 million people.
Yeah, I mean, part of me is like that. And like, for example, I would fight in the streets for people's rights, like for legal rights. I would if there was a situation where there was something like the Holocaust going on, and I could like join the war to go stop that, I would put my life on the line. And so there is, but I don't think I would be able to hit a button to end my own life to just magically save others. I think we all romantically like to think that, and maybe some would, I don't not
I'm
believe
telling you,
you.
right, I 100% would.
To save
I'm,
10 million. Okay.
yeah, yeah,
That's
no
nice of
question in
you.
my mind.
Yeah, no, I don't. And maybe I would, and I don't know how much. If I didn't, I don't know how much of that instinct versus something that's not instinct, where I just have this like will to live. Like I want to live so bad, dude. I want to live. I want to live on. Um, but but yeah, just as far as others, though, if I could take this individual and kill them, but we all have our different things, though, because I have an idea of what I think is morally right and how I would act and think others should act. But but even if I thought I would kill this one person to save 10 million, I would easily press a button to have 10 million die before my daughter. Well,
Well,
what about you? Whoever's
yeah,
not
I've had
whoever's
this conversation with my wife actually.
okay, cool. And
And
just
we,
don't have her watch this. But yeah, what would you
no,
sacrifice your wife for 10 million?
yeah, I would. Yeah. And she wants me to. Um, and same thing. Like,
What if you didn't know she wanted you to?
yeah, I would still do it.
Have you seen the show The Last of Us?
I haven't. It's on my list though.
Okay, never mind. Ignore everything I just said.
I can't wait.
Um we'll talk about that when you watch it. Yeah, interesting. Okay. I that your deep want and care to save this wild number of people. I think I have that deep love to want and do whatever I needed to save the people closest to me. Um and yeah, I don't know. I don't. Yeah, it's weird. In a sense, I don't think the number matters. A big part of it is the violating someone's rights, essentially, where if 10 million
Well,
people are
the number
dying.
must matter, like, or something. Like, I mean, the reductio of you would like categorically choose somebody who's close to you versus people you don't know, is you can
Mhm.
just keep scaling down how close they are to you and scaling up like the badness that happens on the other side of the ledger. So it's
Mhm.
like your second cousin twice removed gets a
Oh,
broken knee versus like 10 million planets of people tortured for eternity or something.
the number matters in a way. The number definitely matters if I got to pick who died. If it's I pick, because I don't consider it picking by pulling the lever. I consider that me actively killing. If no matter what, this person was going to die or these people were going to die, let's say I didn't know ages or
Okay.
anything. If it's 1 versus 5, I would choose for the one to die, hands down.
Right.
That's if one of those groups were going to die.
Okay.
But then if you start adding in the elements of age and what they've done in life and what their religion
Yeah. I
is, or
mean,
I
let's
don't
say
know.
innocent people, innocent atheists on one side of the ledger, and it's okay. I don't know
I was kidding about the
whether it's,
religion. That doesn't matter.
yeah, no, it's
Yeah.
if it's better to say with the trolley car, like, would your answer? So would you? Because to me, it's like if somebody is taking the action, it's like you're put in a scenario where you are
Mhm.
forced to choose. So the action is just um
I don't
it's a
I
yeah.
don't view it that way. If the trolley car was going to do something where on its trajectory it was going to split off somehow
Mhm.
and one car go one and one go the other way, and it was going to kill all the 1 and the 5, and I could press a button and have it kill just 1 or just
Right.
5, then I would have it
Oh,
just kill
interesting.
1. But
Okay.
that's if it
Interesting.
was going to take them all out and I could choose. If it's And I think that's why it's
Hmm.
designed to say it's going towards the 5, um because it's would you do your action, and that's why the follow-up is usually the fat man, because
Hmm.
pulling the lever is like pushing the fat man or taking out the organs. You are causing that action, and I don't think it's due to the number of people you're saving. I think it's just the idea of, would you cause it, and not even just personally, would you press a button without looking to save it? And and I don't want to cause a death.
Hmm. Yeah, I've got to think through my view on the action thing a little more. You've given me a couple things to think about there. I feel like at one point in my life I had an, because I went through all these. I majored in philosophy and we had these discussions of the
Oh,
trolley
cool.
car, and I feel like I was clear on my view at one point, and I just got to think it through again, because I haven't really thought about the action versus nature taking its course and
Mhm.
whether that factors into my moral system or not.
Yeah. Well, and
But
then you got action versus something like neglect, where I guess the nature taking its course would be like neglect. But I view that as such a wildly different thing. If somebody, usually when I do abortion talks, when I describe my thoughts on like bodily autonomy, it would be, even though I have my concerns with how people use bodily autonomy, if I saw somebody dying in the street and all I had to do to save their life was to pluck out one beard hair and then they'd magically be fine. Legally, I don't think I should have to pluck out that beard hair, even though it causes no harm to me. I think I think we should all have our rights to our own body and do what we want. And then with that person on the ground, I think it's messed up that I don't easily save them, but I don't think that it's anything like killing. It's just a lack of saving. Now, obviously, I'd be an asshole and nobody should want to talk to me. But I think there's
you'd
not
be an
only
asshole because it would go against you, like you would have a moral obligation, but not a legal obligation in your view.
yeah, I think I'd have a moral obligation, but I also would view the moral side of it as nowhere near as bad as the killing, because that person's dying of natural causes in a sense of what we the beard hair will give them a fruitful young start over or whatever. They're not dying of natural causes that will continue, but they are dying of something outside of my control, but I do have the control to save it. I think any reasonable person would save them, but what if you were going to have to run across a person like that every minute and your beard hairs kept coming back, but you got to sleep at some point?
Yeah,
Anyways, I don't know what I'm
this
getting
is,
at, but
well, that's like, it's an interesting point. I think it's called utilitarianism or something, where it's like you are forced to continue, like if utilitarianism is your view, then you would be forced to, like at your own expense, like basically live as a slave, donating all your money to the most people in need, and plucking the beard hairs out of every, like, yeah, there's, and I would sort of view that through a similar lens of like, there's probably some threshold of that should be obligatory, like taking time out of your own, morally obligatory. I'm with you on the legal side, not necessarily mirroring the moral obligation thing. I'm for more rights in the law, but from a moral perspective, yeah, up to some threshold, like I think it's saving drowning children. It's like, I don't think you need to be a slave to drowning children and spend your entire life sitting there rescuing people. But some amount of your life, if there was infinite children being drowned in that lake, some of your life, there would be an obligation to spend. I don't know quite where that threshold is, but I think that, like, intuitively that sort of makes sense, right? Like, yeah. You're probably on the same page.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Unless somebody on the other side is sadistic and putting them in, based on you pulling them out.
So okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to ask you where you want to go to next on it.
Oh yeah, perfect. Okay, so we went down that whole rabbit hole because I was asking you about sort of your view on suffering, and so that I think gave a little bit more clarity. And I think it started with me asking you whether or not you factored in like positive utility into your suffering calculation. And you said we were on like the cow, like is a 4-year life of good life better for a cow than 3 years? And where are you at now on that? You're saying that you don't care between those two worlds of the 3-year good life cow versus the 4-year good life cow, or you do prefer one of those two worlds?
I'm going to answer that after I ask you a question that's almost identical. Okay, so let's say there's a guy in front of you, and he gets to pick how long he lives. He wants to live to 100, but he doesn't want to live past 100. He thinks it'd be like super. He just doesn't want to get too old, but he's in perfectly good health. And anyway, so he gets to 100. He's going to die on his 100th birthday, and this is the natural cause. This is just what's happening. But you could press a button and you could make him live one more week, and we'll say that week would be pure joy. I'll just have a great time, but he doesn't want to. He has no interest in it. Would
I
you
wouldn't force them. No.
Okay. So that's kind of my stance on it is partially based on making something exist in a time where maybe it wouldn't to have pleasure is not ideal for me. So if the cow is going to be killed at 3 years and I could ask that guy to let it live another 10 days, a week, a month, a year, for the pleasure, and then it's going to die.
That
I just
almost
feel
sounds
like,
like you're doing the inverse. Like the cow would have lived to be 4 or more years, and the
well,
killing of the
so
cow early is bringing about the non-natural
well, that's why
force of.
legality has a huge impact on it. So this 100-year-old, he wasn't naturally necessarily getting to 100. He chose that. He chose that
Mhm.
age. We could say he was 50. We could say he's 3. Who cares? The legality matters because if if this person is free to not be killed, then they are their wants kind of matter in a sense. If you can legally kill a cow, that cow, the person that's going to kill it has complete control over it living or not. I can't decide if I want to make it be a living cow till its natural time. I can know that this person's going to kill it. So in a sense, I'd say if something is going to be killed, the faster the better. Now, obviously, there'll be detail about why it might be better to not have it happen sooner. But when they grind up the male chicks in the egg industry, I actually think that's it's one of the most disturbing images, but it's one of the least harmful images of all, or ideas of all of animal industry is right when this thing is born as quick as possible. It is just taken out. It's not like made to suffer or whatever. I make having those chicks live 7 more days and having a good time if they lived in a gray area and then they were
Yeah.
put down the grinder. That 7 more days means nothing to me in a world where it's legal to do it. If it's legal to do it and they're going to do it anyways, the only thing that would change it is if I allowed it that 7 more days, if somehow there was thought that I could make it have even more days or go off into the world and live in nature, and
Okay.
I can't do that, so that does change it.
Okay. So I'll limit the scope. So we're evaluating 2 farms, I guess. One that keeps that, and these farms are like the best of the farms. Like they spend time, they play with their cows. Let's even say they're what are those called? Animal rescue
Yeah,
sanctuaries.
sanctuary, yeah.
Yeah. So let's say there's those things. But they painlessly kill the cows for some reason
Yeah.
at some point. So are you saying that if they're going to kill the cow like 2 weeks before the end of its life versus after, immediately, let's just say, so they rescue the cow from the factory farming world, and in one sanctuary they just kill the cow, and in the other sanctuary they give it like as good of a life as it can, but they choose to kill it a week before it would have naturally died?
Yeah, I've never been convinced that amount of pleasure for the weeks means anything. But
That amount of
I would love
pleasure.
to. I'd love to. I think either of those are
Which
equal.
of those would you prefer? Those, so like let's say you were the cow in the factory farming scenario.
But it was like in a humans being farmed.
Sure.
Um, I don't know. So you know how I described that I have my will to live and all these things I want to
Right.
do.
Okay.
I
Sorry.
don't
Let's not go
know.
into that. Okay.
No, you're fine. I just don't know if that would factor in a situation where I can't do any of those things I want. If it was a painless death either way, which one would I prefer? I don't know. I'm probably the sooner death. I really don't know. It's hard to imagine what the life would be like what the comparative thing for if we view um an open area with all this grass for a cow, what that's like for a person of of my mindset, would this mean that I have a couple weeks to just listen to my favorite music before I die? Maybe.
Well, not a couple. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't really matter. But I wasn't saying kill them in a couple of weeks. I was saying let them live their life, and a week before they naturally die, you kill them.
Oh, sorry. Okay. That potentially changes everything.
Doesn't seem like it should change much. I mean, in either
Yeah.
case, you're getting to live some positive days, whether it's a
Mhm.
few dozen or a few hundred or whatever. Um, but you're still being killed. And then let's even say there's a third sanctuary that just doesn't kill them. So the only difference between Sanctuary 2, where they kill them a week before they die, and Sanctuary 3, where they kill them, where they don't kill them, is that last week of their life. Are you saying Sanctuary 3 is, way up here? Sanctuary
Mhm.
2 is in equal to Sanctuary 1, where they just kill them immediately?
It would depend on a handful of factors. If having them in the sanctuary affected how other more are being bred, that would be a big impact. But if it's not, if more aren't being bred, then I would say that assuming I'm right that we don't need to eat animals, and if my what I think would be the most ideal thing to do with farm animals and pets currently, let's say in our country, if we knew we did not need to eat them, would be to outlaw the breeding whatsoever and to have a government funded giant sanctuary where all of them are sadly spayed and neutered, which is sad. Or if the sanctuary is big enough that it's kind of like a wildlife preserve, then they don't need to be spayed and neutered. They'll just they'll essentially be out in the wild, and some will make it and some won't. And then they would just live out their lives. So yes, kind of what you were describing. The factor that would change it slightly would be the knowledge of it being bred to suffer. I might think it would be better to put it out of its misery if chickens have been bred to lay 30 eggs a month instead of 1 egg a month. And depending on how painful that is, I don't think we need to rely on seeing the joyful time of day when they're running around. Maybe we should just euthanize them. Same thing with like little chihuahuas or dogs that can't breathe well. We might just have to guess that it would be better to euthanize them. A handful of things like that. Sorry, I
So
went off. Yeah.
yeah. So I am with you on the if an animal is like living like a horrible life and they would probably want to be put out of their misery, or that's our best guess or whatever. I think I'm with you that it's if you're trying to act in their best interest, it's okay to kill them.
Mm.
Are you saying that all rescue sanctuaries should just kill the animals, or like it's
Um,
equally, you'd prefer that world equally?
it would depend on the size of it. If it was something like a free wild area, then no. Because I
Why does
kind
the
of think
size matter if the utility is held constant, like the quality of their life is held constant?
I guess that's what I would call the quality of their life.
Okay,
And I could be wrong. Like there are some fish that supposedly like to be in a specific tiny little tank because even in the ocean,
I didn't
they
know that, but
wouldn't
okay.
move much. I can't think about a beta, maybe a beta fish. But anyways, so if we knew that they got some weird joy from being in a small area, I guess so my thought is as long as hunters wouldn't accidentally shoot each other, um yeah, we'll stop there. Wouldn't accidentally shoot each other. Um, I think the best thing we could possibly do with factory farming is just have all this wildlife where cows and chickens and lambs can all just be out in nature, and then hunters they'll be living their best lives, not caged and not fed garbage. They just live their natural lives, and then somebody takes them out instantly and then eats them or whatever. I think that would be ideal for an animal eating society. And so the reason I say the cage thing is because yes, the idea of a sanctuary, having them, if they're going to have a good life, then yes, don't kill them, don't euthanize them. Um,
Okay.
yeah,
So
I don't.
you prefer, like, between two options, one in which they have a better life and get to live the life, and two in which they are killed. You prefer the one where so positive utility does factor in.
Mhm. Yes. So
Okay.
we can go back to the 3-year thing. You got a 3-year cow where I say giving it an extra week of pleasure doesn't matter. if you let it roam free out in the wild, I think when I say an extra week of pleasure, I don't consider that mattering on a farm. And this might involve figuring out a bunch of details. But I do think that if it suffered 3 years on a farm, that suffering or lack of pleasure doesn't matter. I would still say that if they were willing to let it go out and just roam in the wild before killing it, I mean, if they're going to kill it either way, I don't think it needs that extra pleasure. If they're going to kill it at 3, they're going to kill it at 3. But if they don't need to kill it at 3, and that's not going to change anything other than they're going to wait a week to kill it, then sure, let it go out into nature. But not because I need it to get any extra pleasure. Yeah.
I don't know that I'm following.
I don't know if I am either, but
yeah, like you want to try, do you want to like one more hash it out?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what if I just ask you straight up, like, do you prefer between non-existence and existence with positive utility, like whatever creates that, like if we hold it, like if we cross whatever threshold of utility, like if that means the cow has a super great life or whatever, it's like, I don't know if you think that it needs to be in the wild in order to achieve a level of utility high enough. I think like they, not necessarily, I mean, maybe we could put some sort of a simulation goggles where they actually aren't living in the wild, but they're still in a confined space, but it still feels to the cow as though they, they're living their best life or whatever. So we have this great positive experience for the cow or just instant painless death. Do you have a preference between those two scenarios?
I think I lean towards the death.
You prefer the death even?
I think so. It's really hard to know because we can't know what's within their brains. If they have enough of a will to live or a brain that's able to take in what's going on, I think they would be so against being caged in that they'd prefer the death. If they do not have the brain for that, and therefore they don't have the care, then I can't imagine caring about their existence because I wouldn't blip something into existence to gain pleasure. So I can't imagine but then again, part of me says in nature, we just leave it alone. Everything should live out its life. And nature sort of is caged in because everything that's not man-made, where we have our own roads and our fences, is caged in. So at what point do I call it a cage versus not a cage? It's really tough. Well, I take back preferring the death, but I really don't. I don't know. It might depend on each individual cow, which we can't know, which is why I lean more towards leaving it out to nature. And even to the point where I don't even think we should go out to nature and find wounded animals to save them. Because so if I had a clear answer for this cow situation, I'd have more of a clear answer of what we should do to protect animals in nature. But
so the conflicting principles in your view seem to be like letting nature run its course, some sort of utility calculation that prefers, or that weights suffering more than pleasure, and then maybe to a lesser extent even tier 3. So tier 1 seems to be like the nature running its course. Tier 2 seems to be like the utility calculation, which has a greater multiple on the suffering than the pleasure. And then tier 3 seems to be some sort of like a rights sort of thing. Is that a fair take on the factors that weigh in?
Yes, I think so.
Okay. Yeah.
And I think it all boils down to why I wouldn't pull the lever. It's the force, the impact force that I think we should have, like the causing something versus the saving something.
Right. Yeah. And I'm going to think about that on my own. but yeah, anyway, I think we got pretty far down that road. I have more questions on that, but do you want to maybe save that for a
Yeah.
part two someday?
Is it like on the same topic or just more
It
questions
it's
on
uh
veganism?
it's within the same vein for sure.
Okay, throw it out and then maybe we'll save the question for later, but I can know of the question.
Sure. Okay. Well, it's more questions around what factors into your view on like the utility calculation. So around like are you so if you're evaluating an action, it seems like you factor in sort of the direct consequences of the action, but also like all of the externalities as well, the consequences of that action into the calculation. So it's like if I'm shooting a cow, but I know that shooting the cow, people will see it on YouTube and like think it's horrible and like 1,000 cows will be saved. Is it morally good to shoot the cow knowing that that consequence happens?
Mm. Yeah, no, I think that would fit into the same situation where I don't think doing that act, it's complicated. I think again, I think legality changes everything. Um, I think something that's illegal to kill, like a person, but even if it was illegal to kill cows, you doing that to, let's say magically it made a bunch of people that were illegally killing cows or people not do it, I would say no, you should not.
Okay.
But if doing the action prevents people that are doing legal actions from doing those legal ones, then that's different for me. And I don't, and you could try to figure out why or convince me I'm wrong about that. But it's kind of like the idea that, so I'm against the egg industry, but I was thinking about this because a friend asked me a question about would it be better or worse to support like a certain type of free range egg, and if they don't support, and I came up with this idea in my head where if this free range egg company needed to sell to 100 customers to be able to stay afloat, then if there was 100 and one of those hundreds was thinking about going vegan and not purchasing any more eggs, that would make that company go under, and therefore there'd be let's say in that area there'd be no
Right.
access to free range. It would be more moral to support that free range egg, assuming that it's a true free range egg. Then yeah, it could be more moral to do that action. So I think that would be like what you're describing, where if you do this bad action but it causes a good thing in this world where it is perfectly legal and fine to do this act, then I think that is the correct thing to do.
Okay.
And so I've pondered the idea of, what if I were able to find wild chickens that only laid one egg a month instead of like rescued chickens that still do the one a day, and they suffer, assuming that they suffer a crazy amount, but I could find wild ones, and I had like an endless amount of money, so I didn't, let's say I didn't need to make a big profit off of it, but I could just have all these wild ones in this big open free range area, and I sold their eggs. I think I would be every dozen sold, meaning a dozen not sold of ones in
Right.
stores, would be a benefit, and I think that would be a moral action I could do in this legal world. But then it might be like I'm doing the slave thing that I'm against, so who knows?
Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah, I think all those things would have to be factored in of like the there's the empirics question of whether that actually would be a better if you calculated the total like suffering or and all the factors, the pleasure, suffering, the rights, like everything that weighs into your moral system, which one would come out like more favorable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. How about things like um does intention factor in? So is it better to push a button that you don't know what it does, but it kills, or sorry, not is it better? Which is if we're talking about your moral system, which is the morally like worse action? So I push a button. I don't know what the button does, but if I find out that it tortures, let's call it like 10 people or something,
Mhm.
or I go with a, or I push a button and I think it's going to torture 10 people and it does nothing. Which is the morally, which button?
Yeah, let's save this one for next time.
Okay.
I like it. The other one was so connected. I think it works perfectly, and I think we can go a whole awesome direction with that one. But yeah, I think that was a great talk, and yeah, we'll do another one soon.
Sounds good, man. Have a good weekend. Cheers.
All right, take care.